Hello, everyone.
Welcome. I'm Pamela Aaralyn. I'm from aurareader.com. I'm a clear conduit channel. Have been doing so since age 5. For those of you who don't know me, you can find me at aurareader.com. This is Candace Craw-Goldman, quantum healing hypnosis expert and practitioner. And she has been along my side in this journey for quite some time now. So I'd like to introduce you to Candace and let her tell you about why she's here and what we're doing together.
Thanks, Pamela. Hi, everyone. Well, I'm blessed to be here. Let me start with that. There have been some questions, how did this all happen and why are we doing this? I just want to start by even saying this. We didn't ask for this at all. We didn't go looking for it. It came looking for us. And that's the easy way of answering it. So Pamela began having a conversation with Dolores Cannon several months ago, and I became aware of that conversation through mutual friends. And I was, to put it mildly, incredulous. I wasn't ready to accept that Dolores Cannon was allowing anyone to speak for her until I began to speak with Pamela myself. And it became very clear very quickly that there was indeed a very genuine connection between Pamela and Dolores Cannon. And then this relationship between us all grew. And Pamela then began having a group of people, scientists actually, join Dolores in some of these conversations. And that became known by a really wonderful, fun name, the Spiritual A-Team. And so the members of the Spiritual A-Team who we're talking with today are Dolores Cannon, Masaru Emoto, Nikola Tesla, and Albert Einstein. And there's maybe even one or others standing at the ready to possibly join this Spiritual A-Team. And we're going to have a conversation with them today. And it's our second webinar conversation with this team. And so why and how did this group form? And I'm going to let Pamela answer that question. How did this group form? Why did it form? What are we even doing here today?
It formed because I'm a person who, for a long period of time, held a purpose of spiritual awareness, and that is one of my primary heart-centered and mind-centered purposes here. And I attracted a being known as Nikola Tesla quite inadvertently at 3 a.m. one night. Had a very interesting experience, and before I knew it, I was awake and playing fractal-based board games at 3:30 a.m. With this being, and at the time I was like, okay, I don't quite know who you are and why you're trying to teach me math, but I'm not interested. I'm used to this as a clear conduit channel. Sleep is not incredibly relevant, and I do get awakened quite often. So I thought, oh, here we go again. And he said, no, really, you have a purpose. We have things to do. You need to awaken, even more so than you have spiritually. You need to awaken your mind. You're awakened in so many facets on other levels, but you need to understand what my purpose was, what my purpose is. And we began to talk about how we could awaken human DNA and how we could restructure negative brain patterns, reformulate negative core belief systems. And we began to talk about ancient alchemy, transmutation. We began to talk about the grid system on Earth and ley lines and everything in between. And then we began to talk about human brain. So from that point on, we developed a process called the flow of the I Am, and that was channeled directly through this being, Nikola Tesla. And my entire community was on fire with interest, and I thought it would just be one process and we would just stop there. Okay, you got your process, now I can sleep and now you can leave me alone. And it didn't transpire in that way at all. So he added more of his own little team. In came Emoto, and then I talked to him for a little while, and he said, we need to discuss water, and we need to discuss the percentage of water in the human body and how it's relevant, and this is a part of your work. You can't be an alchemist without discussing water. And it just went from there. I think from that point on, I had been trying to call in Einstein because Nikola wanted me to do so, and it wasn't working. It's not that easy. I can't call people in at will. There has to be a purpose. So that one took a while. And then when Dolores came in, then, you know, Einstein became a real regular. So then we began to, they began to wake me up coming in together. And that went on for about 6 months. So at that point in time, I was already channeling Dolores Cannon quite regularly. And she was telling me that she wanted to make some changes to some of her work. So it's just ongoing. We are developing and we will continue the work and we'll see what happens.
You know, this is just so interesting. I would like to start out by just noting the fact, and I'll note the fact saying that I don't know a whole lot about historical channels, other people who've channeled, except for some of the, you know, the big ones, the big guys. But I don't know that anybody has worked in this way, Pamela, where this number of beings in different areas of life, different times of human life have come together. Yes, channels have channeled collectives, you know, Palladians or this collective or that collective. But this collection of, you know, human personalities who have left the 3D world and moved to the next, and then are hanging out and then grouping together and talking to you. Pamela, do you know anybody who's doing anything like this? Isn't this really unique as far as you know?
Well, as far as I know, but I honestly don't do a lot of my research. I'm so busy with this work that I try not to endeavor upon other journeys in those ways, because I feel that I want to keep my slate clean.
Mm-hmm.
And Dolores won't let me read her work. I try to get a hold of the convoluted universe. I start to read a couple of chapters and she's like, we've already discussed everything in there.
Yeah. And, you know, that actually answers the question a little bit about what the heck am I doing here? Because I'm not the channel. You know, Pamela's got that talent, has that connection, and has those communications with those beings. So why the heck am I here? Well, because I am incredibly loyal to Dolores, and I love her so much. And I feel a little bit like a pit bull or guard dog about Dolores Cannon. I would not ever feel like I would want to support anything that didn't support her spirit, her knowledge, her wisdom, her legacy, because of how loyal I am to that woman, and my own connection, which isn't quite like Pamela's. But I do have that connection. I do run and founded and continue to run Dolores Cannon's original support forum for QHHT practitioners. So when Pamela started talking about expanding the method, there was also you know, a lot of loyalty things happening there, and a lot of my colleagues were very protective of Dolores and Dolores's work. But we've warmed up as we've continued this conversation. And why is that? Because Dolores's energy is really here, and it's really talking to us, and it's really reaching through and making connections through us, through our sessions that we have with our own clients, and in other ways, dreams, meditations, etc. So what is Dolores doing? She's doing this huge thing. She's bridging science and spirituality, and she's bringing in these big guns and using this platform, which is Pamela, who can hear very clearly. And you can really know that when she comes to a word or a concept that she doesn't know, and then suddenly she's spelling and then the concept or word comes out, and then we're able to talk about it. So that's why I'm here, because I've been practicing QHHT for 8 years now. And I know the method inside and out. And this is part of why these beings have collected. It's to create this method to help humans on their evolution and in their ascension. And these beings, Tesla, Einstein, Emoto, and Cannon, are the ones coming together helping us do that.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
kind of, yeah, that's kind of the encapsulation of what we're doing here and why. And some of what we're going to do, just a brief review. What have we learned so far? Well, we talked a little bit last time about entanglement, quantum entanglement. And what was that? Well, that had to do with past lives, the energy of past lives. And we put past in quotes because it's all, of course, happening at the same time. But it's all soul matter, and it affects the humans in an emotional and spiritual way because of the entanglement between experiences. And we also learned about different parts of the human body, the glands. The mind-body-spirit connection was one thing I wanted to make sure to review. We talked about the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the pineal gland last time. And we're going to continue today with a little bit of focus on what Pamela has already brought up, Nikola Tesla's The Flow of I Am, because it addresses some of what we're focusing on today, which is some of these emotional changes that we can have at a cellular level. And so you've already channeled this process, this direct singular process from Nikola Tesla called The Flow of I Am. Tell us about that, Pamela.
Yeah, that was interesting because that was one of the times wherein he had awakened me with tones, and I am immensely sound oriented, a strong frequency being. That's the dominant nature of my gift. And of course, when you're awakened at 3 a.m. with high pitched frequencies in your head, you kind of wake up and go, okay, yes, I hear that. You have my attention. And from that point on, because I'm a synesthete, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, what that means is I experience light and sound congruent with each other. And when I hear a sound, I experience light, and my entire world opens up to everything that I can see and channel based upon sound. So when he was giving me these tones, he would stop and come in and say, okay, what do you feel with this tone? And he was having me visualize a very ancient style of the Kabbalah-based Tree of Life, but even prior to the ones that are out now that are missing the little heart center thing in the middle. He wanted to make sure that the part of the Kabbalah tree was not, that nothing was omitted. So he said, don't forget that part. That was one of the most important things he said. But each portion of the Tree of Life that he showed me, and this was the most ancient one that I had ever seen, and it was based upon ancient alchemy, even prior to ancient Egypt days. So when I saw this, I remembered it from my own past lifetime experiences, and I went, oh, alchemy, okay. Each of these points of the Tree of Life represent a different dimensional frequency. And then he had constructed various very pure sine tone waves, solfeggio frequencies minus all the background, no overtone, no undertone. And he said it's very important that you get them on pitch and that you don't have any other harmonic tones involved, and that you listen to them in a certain order. So he had labeled them, and he had placed, for those of you who are curious about this process, you can find it by finding me on YouTube. It's under the processes playlist on my YouTube channel. So he had number 1 at the bottom, and then he had a very root chakra based frequency. And then we went up here, and that was number 2. And then this number was 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. And he had them all the way up, and they were based upon the different kingdoms of God, and he had called them something different at the time, but that's the relevance of what we know it as, and different dimensional frequencies. And when we connect to all those frequencies, then we have a remembrance, like a stronger remembrance of the I Am and the many levels of who we are as source when we connect to all of the 12 dimensions. We had this one down here at the bottom, number 1, all the way up to 12 up here, which is source. So it's like a direct connection to source via the specific interpretations of these frequencies and the order in which they were played, and the visual of the beautiful, Kabbalah Tree of Life. So it was a great experience, and we began to test it in our spiritual community. This was about a year ago. And everyone was so excited, and they're like, oh my gosh, my clairaudience just awakened. I'm experiencing Kundalini risings. My clairvoyance is awakening. I'm having lucid dreams. I'm astral traveling. And the community this is how my community grew. It just blew up. It just went on fire. And then I started attracting a lot of a scientific base, and And then, yeah, this is how it all started with that. It's a wonderful process. We use it a lot. Most of us use it almost daily.
Well, I'm happy to learn about it. I came late to this party. I did not know about this until today. So, but it does remind me of some of the things that we talked about last time in the very first Spiritual A-Team YouTube, where we talked about this with the spiraling and the collecting of the different soul selves and soul expressions from the soul fork, I believe is what you were describing last time. So this makes a lot of sense. I do have a question though, if you don't mind, because last time we talked a little bit and Dolores was very adamant saying, you know, machines can't fix you. You know, playing at certain tones can't fix you. And then we talked a little bit about your own soul tone, the thing that brought you into existence. That's you know, your original soul tone is something. So how does this play into those two concepts? This is just this whole range of tones, or can you answer that?
Because we're multidimensional beings. So I love tools. This is my trusty soul fork. I think we talked about this last time. This is source. This is the human body. So to make it simple, if this is your soul stream, and these are just beyond billions of souls, nothing that I can quantify with my human mind. When source decides to project, it comes through in fractals. So this is your body. This is a fractal. This is a fractal. This is a fractal. These are all the existences that you choose to carry through, you know, in your embodied incarnation. So there are tones for each of those fractals of source. And we are a multidimensional being. So I don't have just one tone. And depending upon my expression in any given moment and what frequency my emotions are carrying me through on any given day, I'm going to be resonating with a different source tone. So that is why Nikola Tesla came through and said, well, why don't you, being the multidimensional facet that you are, you know, faceted being that you are, why don't we choose one that relates to the many different levels of humans' existence? And we were learning that humans seem to carry through anywhere from 3 to 11 fractals within them. That's how multidimensional we are. And that's just on average. So we created 12. And the 12th one being source.
I see. So this is kind of an overview. It's a palette of all the colors that is beneficial for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, all the sounds.
I love that. I love that. I can't wait to try it myself. So we're talking a little bit about this, you know, cellular, molecular level existence. And there's something that I've been wanting to ask you for a while anyway, and somebody else brought this up too, our friend Emily. She talked about, and she asks, when you get the shivers throughout your body, she asked when it's high emotion or amazement, and many in our community call them truth bumps. Can Tesla tell us, what is happening at the cellular level when we feel that within our body?
Truth bumps, is that what you said?
Yeah, when there's the vibrating, incredible vibrations that we have when we are presented with great truth, or when we're having an expansion or an opening. Some people, you know, feel them as goosebumps. Some people call them angel bumps. Some people call them truth bumps. It's a shiver. I know for me, when they're very strong, they come around and they go across my entire face, you know, and they go in wave after wave after wave, and they've become stronger for me over the years, especially, of course, now it seems like. What's happening at a cellular level to our body when we feel that? What is that?
I'll go there in a moment, but first I would like to talk about the different types of etheric abilities and gifts that are coming through humans. And the dominant one with most humans is empathy, otherwise known as clairsentient. So that means clear feeling. And many of you watching today have that. So based upon, you know, your origin points and your galactic experiences, what fractals you're carrying through in this incarnation. You
started them up on me.
That's going to come through, but it's also based upon the frequencies that you're carrying through. When you're shifting dimensions, your entire cellular membrane changes. It's permeable. You know, it's, as we were discussing in the last podcast about this, it's even more important than the nucleus, because the outer levels of the cellular membrane, and this is something coming actually from Emoto, the outer levels of the cellular membrane are more absorbent of electromagnetic frequencies. And our environment is all about that. Most of us are frequency-based beings. That's why we came in through tone created us into matter. Tone created light, and light created us into matter form. So when we experience certain emotions, those emotions are frequencies. And based upon the, whether or not that's resonating with us, if those frequencies are resonating with us, that's what causes your, at the biological level, your entire cellular membrane will change. So I was channeling just a few moments before, and this is what I came up with here. If you can see it, because I can't. So the electromagnetic frequencies, this is a really tough diagram to follow over here. My little scribbles. This is your thought form. So when you feel something, you're going to begin to think about it. And this is the outer edge of the cellular membrane, and it's very permeable. And this is how you can understand biology in reference to manifestation. When you have a thought, you're going to take that. That's going to shift the outer level of the cellular membrane. Then it's going to turn into an emotion. That emotion is the level beyond that, an even deeper level. And then the nucleus, that's step 3. By the time you turn those emotions into an action form, your entire cellular nucleus can change. And this is why it's very, very important, to make sure that your environment is stress-free. If not, at least you can transmute that stress into a higher frequency before it gets to here, this level of you, biologically speaking, because this affects your body. This goes straight into a manifestation of your health and your mental state as well. Your organs, it can become disease. If stress gets in here like that, the nucleus is what will change. So this is when, Emoto likes to come in and tell us about the importance of this. I was feeling a little nervous before this podcast, so I made sure that I took my hand and breathed a certain emotional frequency and emotional tone into this water, and then drank it right away to kind of unify myself with you, so that you and I could be on the same frequency in this podcast.
Beautiful. Pamela, the diagram that you were showing us, is that a single cell? Is that every cell in our body?
That's a single cell. Mm-hmm.
So that's a single cell. And when we're feeling those shivers and that vibration, you're saying that every cell in our body, we're feeling that? Because sometimes people feel them, like, say, only in their arms or their legs or in different waves. How does that work?
The brain. Basically speaking, the brain matter will, especially, when any cell can be affected, all the cells are interconnected, electromagnetically speaking. So if there's one, then all of them are going to light up in their frequency. And then peptides are going to be transferred into various levels of your body that cause you to have an emotional response.
Okay. All right. I was looking at some of the questions, and I know that I started to say this, but Tamara asks the glands. We want to make sure that we repeat which glands affect which parts. The mind, body, and spirit, the pineal, the pituitary, and the hypothalamus. Can we go over that just one more time for those of us who need to hear it again?
The mind is strongly affected by the hypothalamus, according to both Tesla and Emoto and Einstein. They all agree on that. And this is a different teaching. I'm offering something new here because most people will say it will be opposite from what I'm about to tell you. But the mind, and what I mean by the mind, it's not the spirit component of the mind, but the brain component of the mind is very hypothalamus oriented. It's very fight or flight. So it's important for us to, like I said, be very aware of what thoughts we are carrying through. The body is primarily affected by the pituitary gland and the pituitary chakra system. The spirit is primarily affected by the pineal gland.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. All right. So, as you were telling us this last time, and we were talking about the mind, body, spirit, and we're talking about this idea of alchemy, and emotional alchemy, spiritual alchemy. This is why the team's together, why Dolores has brought them, hoping to continue to assist humans. We asked the question why last time. Why do these beings really bother? Why do they care? Because we're God pieces too. They are staying and communicating within the fourth dimension, because they can go back and forth between the third and the fifth, which is where you also like to be. So one of the things in QHHT, what we've done with Dolores over the years as practitioners, we would ask just within that state, in those regressive states, we would ask some of us at times to have the traumatic cellular memories removed at that time. And sometimes that worked, and sometimes it worked amazingly, beautifully. Poof, they're gone. And other times it didn't work. Can you help us understand that, or any of your team help us understand that? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. What's the difference?
Your belief. See, this is how the brain operates, and this is what, all of them wanted to talk to you about today. It's very important to understand that if you're operating in the hypothalamus likes to catch on to a very primal fight or flight response. So what that means is you could do the work, you feel great after the work, and then you go back to your job or family or day-to-day existence, and then you have a trigger, and then you're like, oh no, I had a trigger. And the brain kicks in and the hypothalamus grasps onto that, and begins to say, and then you step into egoic nature. And when you step into the inner critic portion of the brain, that just takes over and makes you believe something. If you choose, you can step into a belief pattern that makes you really begin to recreate and resynapse and essentially recreate the disease pattern, both mentally and physically, that you had worked so hard at transmuting in any process, whether it be mine or any regression or healing process. So this is why in some of my process work, especially if you look at aura alchemy, in step 3, this is the most important part of my process. I have had some people work through this process, these alchemy-based processes, mine or anyone's alchemy-based process for that matter, when they go straight to step 3 because their belief systems are so strong that they're just so done with disease at the physical and emotional level that they say, you know what, I'm in that space where it doesn't matter what I'm going to go back towards. I'm going to choose to believe something. However, not everyone is in that space. It takes a lot of, unfortunately, it takes a lot to get to that space, a lot of suffering normally, a lot of pain to get to that space. And if you can switch your belief system before you have to go through all of that trauma, this is what step 3 offers. You go through any transmutation process. You go through the memories, you allow yourself to be regressed backward, whether it be this lifetime or another lifetime. You validate what occurred in the memories. You choose a positive belief system. You go through the transmutation processes. You add sound, light, color, any alchemical processes that, mine or another teacher would have to offer. But here's the most important part. What you do in your present moment thereafter. That's step 3. You have to remember, what did you choose? Because you're going to need to remind your hypothalamus system that you did indeed do this work. So every time you have a trigger, you're going to go back. And this is step 3 in aura alchemy. You will say, oh yeah, what did I do? I transmuted, say the negative imprint was powerless. That's a really common one in the human conscious collective. I transmuted powerlessness into acceptance. What color was powerlessness? What color was acceptance? Remind yourself of what you did. Go through the I am invocation again. So then you would say, I invoke the I am in me to feel my acceptance. And then you breathe in the color that you chose for acceptance in the process. You breathe it back down and exhale it to the portion of your body in which you're feeling that trigger, whether it be anxiety or depression or anger or frustration or whatever it is. And that breath, when you reconnect to the breath, that is the I am. And when you sound out the I am, particularly with your mouth, not just in your mind, the mind's helpful, but when you say it out loud, it's very powerful. So when you say, I invoke the I am in me, whatever you say thereafter will re-stimulate your the work that you did and remind your brain that you did this work. And it's a very powerful part of any process. And what I was noticing in most shadow work processes is that was missing. People were going into the shadow and then staying there, basically just grasping onto it. And And they would come to me years later and say, you know what, I did this process of shadow work, and I did some Byron Katie work, and I did some completion process, and I did this and I did that. So why do I still feel this pain? And I'm like, because this is woundology. You are addicted to that pain.
Yep.
Not because you want to be, but because your brain wants you to be.
Mm-hmm.
So these processes that we're working towards, the beyond quantum healing, the aura alchemy, many of these processes that we're working on, they pull it into the power of the now, the moment. And within that I am invocation, you remind your brain of the work that you did. And you will see those triggers diminish. You will be in mid panic attack and you will see and expand through that trigger.
I actually see a question for Mario that plays into this right now. He asks, what would be a good strategy of identifying the responsible core belief behind a detrimental habit or mindset? That's some of what you were just talking about, right?
Can you repeat the question?
He wants to know a good strategy of identifying the responsible core beliefs, behind a detrimental habit or mindset, which is exactly what you're talking about here, is finding the core issue here. How do you find the core issue? Is that what the shadow work is you were talking about? And what are some other ways?
That is, those steps are listed on my website under the processes section in the aura alchemy process, which begins with shadow work. It begins with finding the component of you that is still stuck in the subconscious. That part of you that's acting subconsciously without your conscious awareness, and sometimes with your conscious awareness, but most of the time not. So regression can do that. Quantum healing hypnosis can do that. Some of the processes that we're working on now can do that. There are many processes that can do that. So also another problem that I'm noticing, and when clients are coming to me and they're attempting to identify their shadow, is resistance. So you can read, Do the Work by Byron Katie, or you can read Loving All That Is by Byron Katie. That is pretty much a full description of how to get past the inner critic that prevents you from finding the human shadow. You can look at my resistance process on YouTube if you want to get to the shadow very, very quickly and identify those core belief systems. And yeah, that's my answer.
I'd like to point out, the generous nature of you, Pamela, how you talk about others' work and you give them credit with some of how they are helping to affect humanity. I would like to imagine this is one of the reasons why Dolores, was so attracted to you. And I know that you and I have had conversations about that. And Dolores would watch some of what you were doing, sometimes interrupt what you were doing, and make some conversation about, oh, this would really help. This would really assist or work in the work that I had done with QHHT. And so that's part of why all of this is happening, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much, and she began to step into my sessions, and she likes alchemy, and she said, that's some of the work that I do, and this is some of the work that I could stand to do, and this is what I wish I had learned when I was alive, and here are some of the things that you could stand to learn, Pamela. And and she's like that. So I learned a lot from her. She learned a lot from me, and we as a team are going forward together, and some new process work, and Candace's as well. We're very excited about it.
It is really exciting. And one of the really fun things for us, Pamela and I, when we talk about this, is because we do not have a science mind. The scientists are standing by at the ready. And, we've had scientists send questions, often anonymously, which I find very interesting. But they want to know some of these things, but sometimes they don't want their name attached. But here's a very science-oriented question right about where we are right now, about what's going on at the cellular level, etc. And one of the very science-specific questions is, past the thought and the emotion, etc. Can Tesla talk about the mitochondria, or the production of the ATP, which is the chemical energy used by the cell? What happens with those components of the cell? The gene expression as well, the protein production. Are all of those things affected? For those science-minded folk in our viewing audience, what can you tell them about those components of the cell being changed in this way?
What Emoto is describing right now is that protein production is directly affected by electromagnetic frequency. And when that shifts us into any particular dimensional state based upon our own emotional patterns, we could actually inhibit protein production. So that has been a concern. And this is very, very interesting because it's Tesla's coming through and talking about vegans and how vegans are constantly complaining that they don't get enough protein. And he said it's because you're not managing your emotional levels.
Wow.
You know, your stress levels and people. He said that he's been noticing that people with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, extreme stress-based disorders are exhibiting less protein production from their mitochondria.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How about being in these seas of Wi-Fi's and cellular towers and all of that? That's got to have some effect with our cells and everything we're talking about here.
It does. And Einstein in particular relates the importance of turning it off. You know, he just is pointing to my phone and kind of ratting me out on this because I love my phone. But I've been getting a little bit better about just trying to be like, okay, if it's going to be by my bed, I'm going to try to turn it off a little bit. So turn off your phones, turn off your routers. I particularly love organite, and Tesla is the one who told me that it might be a good idea to have a lot of this. Yeah, this is a resin-based one, and it has a lot of different little, you know, metal flakes in here. And I keep it on my computer. Sometimes I put it directly on my microphone because for those of you who watch my work, you understand that channeling causes all sorts of funny things to happen with my microphone. And the organite is really good to put right on top of your routers. You know, that's something that Tesla was telling me about when I started ordering organite for myself. He said, put that on your router, put that on your microphone, you know, turn your Wi-Fi off and then put it on your router and then reset it in the morning. So he was giving me these little tips about how to use organite to reduce some of that, because it is a big problem and it does affect the mitochondria at some very, very not so basic levels. It can change your entire structure of not just your thoughts, but it creates so much disease in the brain.
What does the organite do? What is the scientific process that it does? Does it neutralize it? Does it provide a shield? What's happening with the organite?
It creates what Tesla's describing is when these metals interact with each other, it produces a certain geomagnetic shield, you know, above and around whatever it's near. So then, you know, those EMFs are here, you know, beyond the shield.
Okay. I'm actually seeing a question from a colleague of mine, Natasha, and she says that she's had clients sent to her in droves for QHHT sessions who have some serious health conditions. Whoops, it just moved because more and more questions are coming.
Yeah.
She wonders, it seems like these serious health conditions have popped up out of nowhere the last couple of years. She's wondering if this has anything to do with timelines condensing, or if these illnesses are being created by other aspects of ourselves, or maybe these Wi-Fi or cellular fields. People who are being diagnosed with cancer when they really don't do, or it doesn't seem like they harbor hatred, which, you know, we as healers have seen for many, many years now. Or people just preparing to move on from this third dimension. It's kind of a multi-part question, but see what you have and your team has to say about that one.
Well, they're all over it, but there's just too many things it's not just one thing is the consensus that I'm getting from all of them. So we are at a really important precipice. The Human Conscious Collective is, I think we talked about this last time. I've been watching the Human Conscious Collective operate in fear, you know, for all 41 years of my existence here. And it was getting worse and worse. And we have recently avoided some pretty, what would have been strongly devastating effects, you know, on especially the Earth's crust. You know, we've avoided a lot of earthquakes and great floods and many things that could have happened simply by individually and then collectively shifting from what was fear over here. This is the seesaw. This is the precipice point, you know, for our expansion and ascension and quickening. We were here with the fear and down here with the love. And we were just going back and forth. And sometimes we'd go way up in the human conscious collective frequency of love, but it wouldn't last for long. And it would always go back to fear. Right now, I notice we're doing a little bit of this, okay? A little bit of wavering, you know, so this means that it's hope for us to shift the love up and pull the fear back down. So the more we work on that individually, the more we're going to be able to do that collectively, because this is the first time since the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, that we are ascending individually and having individual experiences. You know, for those of you who are noticing what is called the Mandela effect, that's something that Tesla and I've been talking about how we are operating in many dimensions simultaneously, but each of us are switching in and out of different dimensional frequencies based upon how much of that fear we are individually carrying. So now that we are stepping particularly through these spiritual communities and we are awakening, there are a lot of people experiencing Kundalini risings. The scientific and spiritual communities are merging more. Things like this are happening, you know, when scientists talk to people like me. You know, so it's unusual, and for once we're operating more in unity within the collectives. And with that being stated, it's not just one reason why all of this is happening, and we need to shift it. We need to shift it, and we need to work on it conscientiously and proactively and responsibly, by being responsible for our own spiritual growth and emotional development.
I remember the last time we talked about how, you know, there's sometimes people feel very hopeless and they feel very powerless when it comes to some of the really big things. I see another question in here, you know, often asking about, here's a question from Lisa. We get this question almost every time we get together, you know, the chemicals, the government, the chemtrails and things like that. What is it that we can do about that? And the first thing is, you know, you can't fix what's happening out there like that. You know, you can only start here. And if you gather with too many groups and you focus too much on fear, you're just fanning those flames, right?
Yes and no. It's good that we have so much access to the internet. We have access to our spiritual communities and to our spiritual family members. We're creating intentional communities. And that's something that, you know, I didn't think that Einstein in particular would be that impressed with, but he is very interested in intentional communities.
Really?
Yes. And he likes the way that people interact, but he wants us to become more responsible for our own clean water sources, our own access to free electricity and the production thereof. And this is very hard right now. We're not in the stage where, if most of us do this, that we can, because we're still, let's be practical for a moment. The government still puts certain regulations on how much food we can grow, and how we can get our water sources, and how we can generate electricity. So unless you're living out in the middle of nowhere and you are, you know, not under those particular, you know, systems, then it's difficult to do that. But that's why it's important that we at least start out in intentional communities and grow into that, and grow into being really interdependent amongst each other, so that when we go through these changes and shifts collectively, that it won't be so catastrophic, you know. And that's why Einstein has really urged the presence of intentional community for the past few months that he's been speaking with me. He's the one that's been speaking with me the least, because I don't really understand his language very much.
Yes. Yeah, I think he seems kind of austere to me. Is that?
Yeah. Yes, and he speaks in mathematics, and I don't, and we're having a hard time. So what he does is, when he wants to speak with me, he speaks with me through music. So sound, if there are certain frequencies that come through, he gets my attention that way. And he even said to me just last night, he woke me up and said, "Music is math. You're a musician. What is your problem?" And I'm like, well, my problem is 3 a.m. That is my problem.
Oh my goodness. Well, actually, I see a question popping up for Einstein if he's right there. Tadashi asks if there's been a lot of experiments that support quantum entanglement, and so has his views changed at all since he's changed his expression in the next realm? If so, can you give us your new interpretation of reality relating to this topic?
He just made a terrible joke. He's a bit of a terrible jokester, and he just said, "Why don't you ask Newton?" And of course, I'm not going to ask Newton. Newton doesn't make any sense to me, and I think he's messing with me a little bit. Yes, his views on the topic have changed a little bit because they've broadened, and he's understanding. And, I showed you guys this diagram last time, and we're going to go through it a little bit again. Entanglement. This is you. This is a fractal of you. This is another fractal of you existing in a simultaneous, source expression where time doesn't exist. So this could be you on Earth. This could be you on Pleiades. It's soul matter. It's fractions of your divinity right here. So here, the line that brings you through is the mind center, but these little shifts here, one's the body, one's the spirit. So essentially speaking, you notice how this looks like DNA? You connect based upon the genetics that you bring through. If this is the Pleiadian fractal of you, this is the human fractal of you, those genetics are being carried through your mind, body, and spirit expressions. So what scientists call junk DNA is not junk at all. It's waiting to be awakened. Okay? So it's these, that's why I created the flow of the I Am process, because when you hear those tones that sounded you into existence, what happens is this connects with this. There's a memory of this being who has a memory of this being, and simultaneously they begin to wake up, and the fractals of each other that are exhibiting and shared between these allegedly two unique and what they would have originally presumed would be separate individual beings begin to awaken and realize that they are one. You got that? So that is entanglement. And basically speaking, there, you see these little flat lines that he drew over here? I don't know if you can see that. These are levels of what we call dimensions: first dimension, second dimension, third, fourth, fifth. And when you are operating at different levels, different frequencies of emotions that are either lower or higher, you are manifesting something. And then you are activating these DNA things closer and closer and closer. You're activating these different components of your DNA the closer you get to the fifth dimension, because Pleiadians operate in a fifth dimension. So if this were an Arcturian over here and this were a human, you'd be activating through 11 dimensions, and that would be your specific pre-birth intention and soul contract to wake up. So you'd be exploring all the different human gamut of emotions that operate within each dimensional existence in order to awaken your DNA. So the more if you're down here at these lower, grief and apathy based frequencies, which is first dimension, you're not really awakening the DNA along the way to remember that you too are this being over here in some other level of existence. You're not really doing that. When these things happen though, and you operate through the different emotional frequencies that you're meant to exhibit in this lifetime, both of these beings wake up, and that's what humans call deja vu. They call it Kundalini rising, they call it awakening, they call it quickening, they call it fastening, they call it ascension, whatever you want to call it is whatever you want to call it. But this is what is occurring. You are entangling.
And you're doing that throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. You're doing it all the time. Every time you breathe, you're doing it. Your thoughts are like this, shifting all the time into an emotion. And those emotions are shifting into actions. Those actions are creating the manifestation of your awakening. And then your DNA patterns are firing, for the better or for the worse. It's your decision.
Actually, another question from Mario just popped up that fits with that. How can you tell when you're moving from one dimension to another? Is there any clue?
Well, third dimension in particular has a particular frequency of fear. So when you're in fear, when you're experiencing anxiety, those are third dimensional emotional frequencies. So you're operating the third dimension. Fourth dimension embodies a lot of emotional frequencies of flow, acceptance, allowance. So when you are operating within flow, acceptance, and allowance, you're operating in the fourth dimension. Fifth dimension is all about compassion, love, generosity, benevolence. When you are in compassionate service to others and to yourself, when you love yourself and love others, that's a fifth dimensional frequency. So it really, joy is a sixth dimensional frequency. So when you're operating in play and joy and bliss, then you're up there.
It's
So
all throughout the day. We were talking about DNA and biology, and my wonderful friend and colleague Nicole has a question, and she wants to know from Emoto or Dolores or Tesla or Einstein, I guess any of them, how are they viewing the Human Genome Project from their perspective and the study of DNA? What things beyond the junk DNA are the geneticists missing or not aware of when they're looking at the biology and the chemistry of DNA? Can we give them any kind of clue? I mean, what thing does God make that isn't useful? Junk DNA has always been so silly, but beyond that, I mean, a silly term, excuse me. Beyond that, what kind of clue can we give geneticists, or what do they think about the Genome Project?
Einstein is relating to us that they specifically seem to be in a paradigm of lack of acceptance of emotional structure as being relevant. So they are not understanding relativity at all. Uh-oh. Emotions are important, and the heart center.
You said it, I didn't.
Not the brain. Yeah, the heart center is the brain, not the brain center in the mind control zone there. Mm. So also he is expressing that there's something missing in their understanding of the Higgs boson, so the God particle. Yeah, it is not a singular expression. They need to think in a multidimensional way when it comes to the God particle. They're missing a lot, is what he's saying.
Very good. You just mentioned about the heart does the learning, and we talked about this last time on the last show, that the heart actually learns first before the brain. Am I remembering that correctly? It does the learning or changing first, and then the brain follows. So can we have some more detail about specifically what neurological changes in the brain happen after the heart accepts something or changes?
Let's see what they're saying. That going back to the cellular membrane, when you are expressing, let me get back to this chart. When you are expressing thought, which generally comes first, this is the outer levels of the cellular membrane. So this is, a cell in your brain. And then when you accept an emotion, when you formulate an acceptance of emotion, it's going to turn into an action which completely changes the nucleus of the cell. So again, based upon what both Emoto and Einstein are agreeing upon, is that it changes everything when you go into a heart-based acceptance.
How about, we hear a lot about neural pathways. And I guess that goes back to some of what we've talked about, that moment where you get to decide the way you want to act or react to something. How do the neural pathways play into this, into accepting real change in our lives?
Level 2 of the cellular membrane, the one that's the layer that's closest to the nucleus there. So that layer, that is what is affected. They're pointing to that layer.
Beautiful. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Some people have been asking about chronic illness. In 4D, illness and suffering cease to exist, and awakening causes healing. Can Emoto or Einstein or anyone tell us how that works on a cellular and molecular level?
How what exactly works?
In 4D, it's been told, or it's been said, that illness and suffering cease to exist. So with chronic illnesses and when suddenly they're healed, is there a way that can be expressed to us to understand how somebody who's suffered with a chronic condition can have instantaneous healing in 4D and then keep it, not go, not descend back into that chronic illness?
Because, and this is coming from Emoto, allowance is the emotional frequency of the fourth dimension. So first step in healing that is to allow, and you accept, and you say, okay, this is what's happening. Yes, I'm in pain. I validate that. Then what? Flow occurs when you allow. When you say, okay, this is what's happening. I'm not going to resist it anymore. What's the worst case scenario with this? So, okay, I agree that I don't feel well. Now what? When you step into the now what, your fight or flight response stops working in that way of going, oh my God, I'm so sick of being sick. What happens is the hypothalamus switches into, I need to prevent something, to I need to allow this. And that is beyond victim mentality when you say, okay, what's the worst case scenario? If I'm sick, I live with it. How am I going to live with it? And you start to visualize, you start to narrow down your thought process, and you start to play with acceptance in a way that you say, okay, what can I actually believe? I believe that I'm sick in this present moment, so I'm validating and allowing this. If you can validate and allow that, it's not victimology, but it steps you into a place where you say, okay, how can I live this way? Which is empowering, because you say, I want to function. I want to function. I want to thrive. How can I thrive with a mental or physical illness? When you start to play with that thought process, and then you build evidence for your inner critic to believe that it's possible to thrive, then you say, okay, I'm done just thriving. What's the next step? I'm done just surviving. I want to feel something strong. Maybe I want to really live and thrive even further. And then you play on what that would look like for size. And you just take it into the next most believable step in everything that you do. And eventually you'll step into flow. Flow means, okay, one day I may feel sick, one day I may feel neutral, one day I may feel great, but I feel changes in this flow, and I am in full allowance of this flow. When you step into full allowance of a flow-based state, you are in trust of source. When you are a trusting source, you open up the neural pathways in your brain to become very effective in healing disease. Very effective, because then you no longer believe that you are diseased. You believe you're okay no matter what, right?
Pamela, in your perspective, what the heck happened to humans that we're so far away from that, or have been, that we just don't trust like that? What happened?
Stress, post-traumatic stress in particular. Staying in fight or flight response, because that is what we are accustomed to.
You've got Jeshua with you again. Your Jeshua voice is coming.
Okay, I'll try to ground it out.
By the way, we love it when you come, Jeshua. Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua. I guess I combined that. Let's see, I think you're grounded out. So
okay,
please continue.
Sometimes when I'm channeling these beings, it can completely mess up the sound system, and that happens. But when I get really excited about the I Am, that just definitely happens. I'm going to pull him through naturally. He should be a part of this team next. That's a thought. When you teach your brain that something different can happen than what you have habitually grasped onto, then you are stepping through flow. And then that's fourth dimensional component. And that's when the brain, the neural pathways in the brain begin to completely shift.
Is that part of this whole, really low dimensional, narrow-minded view of what life is when we're so far away from trust? It seems to me that's such a core issue with us all. Something that we need to continually address.
Yeah, it is something that we need to continually address, and that is awareness. That is the purpose of why all of these scientists are here with us today, because they were fascinated with awareness, and bringing forth these truths when they were alive in human form, and they are not going to give up on us as a human race and the purpose of awareness. These are wisdom-based purposes, truth-based purposes, which will lead to our empowerment, which will lead to our ultimate expansion of our individual and collective purposes here.
You know, I'm thinking, I see several questions on my sheet here and coming through in the question queue also. A lot more about water. We want to talk a little bit more about that. I'd like to start with just understanding Dolores and Emoto's connection. Can we ask a basic fun question? Have they incarnated often together as a team? You know, they left the planet here within days of each other. I don't even know if they spoke directly with each other. They were probably aware of each other's work. But I'm wondering a little bit about, you know, their soul contracts, if they've worked together before, etc.
That would be Emoto and Dolores Cannon?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, definitely. They've done that time and time and time again. That's nothing new. That's what they're both saying.
That's great. That's great. So here's a question. Emoto wrote that water has the capacity to memorize and transfer information. So if the water in our cells can be reprogrammed for positive thoughts we send ourselves through self-love, not exactly just water, but can't just our thoughts, isn't that reprogramming the water in our cells? And when we program water directly, how does that boost it or benefit?
He's saying that when you program water directly from a believable emotion, now he's putting this on the believable word, then that is what causes the shift. So don't jump straight from, you know, if you're having a strong agitation, panic-based day, and you just say, what would I rather feel instead? Which is the primary question that you use in this work when it comes to blessing and charging water. And then you're going to go jump straight to agape and love and straight up bliss and celebration. He says, you may not believe that.
Right.
So what can you believe that you would like to feel? What is believable to you? Even if it's just relief. A lot of people who are coming out of PTSD, in particular, anxiety-based frequencies, when you program water with relief, that is a frequency that is close to the frequency of acceptance, and then allowance, and then flow, and then the upper frequencies of love and bliss and celebration. So start with that chart and take a believable emotion, and then that your brain will actually, he's stating that your brain will grasp onto that more believable emotion before the very high frequency of joy, which you can't, your inner critic will shut that down and say, I'm not ready for that, or I don't even know if I believe that.
Right, because you can't fake yourself out. I mean, that's why some of those affirmations don't work. You know, if you go around and you say these things and inside you're not buying it, of course the affirmation isn't going to work. So step by step, you know, as long as we're talking about programming the water, what about the water around us? You know, the pond in the backyard, or the stream that flows through our neighborhood, or anything, you know, how does the water, or does it pick up on our thought forms and where we live? And how do we think about that? And what can we do with that idea?
What Dr. Emoto is describing is that when you have collectively shared bodies of water, I mean, let's just go straight into oceans, since that's what Einstein wants you to cover.
Okay, Einstein.
What are the collective emotions of the humans that are utilizing that water? This can become very political very fast. So we don't want to go into that. What we want to do instead is think about, with the people who live near those structures of water, can they unite together? Can they meditate together? Can they surround the waters together in intentional communities? What frequencies can we choose to impart, you know, to those collective bodies of water? Because that is dependent upon us as a human race. You know, for those of us who surround bodies of water, that is our responsibility.
Mm-hmm. So can they tell us then, are there groups, are there communities that are helping say some of the after effects of Fukushima? Or is some of the human endeavors to assist in that way, are they actually helping using consciousness?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And same with our oceans and the fish that some of us eat, the protein that we take into our bodies, and some of us go to the store or the market and we look at some of those things with some aspects of fear, wondering how much of the after effects of the radiation have landed on our shores. How do we best deal with that? Do we say, well, we're just aware of what's going on here, we're going to transmute it, or I'm going to eat that, or I can't eat that fish? How do we best deal with that?
What do you believe? Back to the belief systems. This is what Tesla is describing. So when you choose what you're going to believe, and you choose, okay, I've decided that I can't eat that. Okay, decide you can't eat it and don't eat it. If you believe that you can transmute it, then transmute it and do it. This is why I love alchemy and cooking. This is when some of these scientists show up too, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, you know exactly what I'm doing. I personally believe that in my personal belief system, and this is going to be the case for many of you, it's based upon your personal belief systems. I don't believe that I can get rid of the effects of radiation just by myself and fish. So I don't eat fish. And when I do eat fish, for those very few times in my life that I'm going to eat it, I'm going to bless it. I'm going to cleanse it with that blessing. I'm going to be really working on the alchemy while I'm cooking that fish. And if I'm eating fish out somewhere, I'm going to really think about and ask myself the question, do I believe that I can transmute whatever's in here? Because I'm a practical person. I don't believe that we can avoid everything. Otherwise,
right.
Why would disease even be in existence when it comes to some of the food? Because the food system in the United States is something that could really stand to use an overhaul.
Yeah. Oh boy.
I can transmute it, but there are many people who just would prefer to avoid it. And if you're in that belief system, then avoid it.
Belief system, again, being kind of the upper part of the pyramid of how and why things work.
Yes.
Kind of going into this idea of water holding memories and thought forms and all of that. Another one of my fabulous colleagues, MJ Ollinger, asks, what happens at the cellular level when the physical body receives an organ from another human being? Do the emotions, the stories, do they collide between the host body and the receiver? What does the A-team have to say about that?
They've been watching that for a while. It's a very fascinating question, and I love to see them sit around and argue about it, because there's been a little bit of
they argue
frequencies. Not everybody's operating in the fifth dimensional facets here. So it's more of a debate, not necessarily a low consciousness argument, but a high consciousness debate rather. And yes, it depends upon the frequency and the belief systems carried within the body of the recipient and the donor. So a lot of times these people have these two beings, the recipient and the donor, will have pre-birth intentions, soul contracts, soul agreements, call it what you will, for them to receive that organ, which has certain memories that are coming through that can help that being in transmuting their own negative core belief systems. So they have certain memories that are programmed within the DNA that's coming through the donated organ, and those particular DNA structures within the donated organ that's carrying those memories, that is going to trigger and catalyze the recipient into their ultimate spiritual purpose. So these are soul contracts, according to Tesla.
Beautiful. In my studio space here in Augusta, the very first, it's been a couple of years since I'm in this particular space, but the very first client I had, I call him the man with three hearts. He was born with a heart. It failed. He had a donor heart. That failed. And he now lives with the third heart. And he had the most extraordinary QHHT session. very much about all the different soul contracts and the decisions and the things that had happened. And one of the primary reasons that he had come for a session was he was incredibly healthy. Here was a man living with his third human heart, and he was an athlete, and he was breaking all kinds of records. And he's like, I'm so healthy. And I'm looking at him thinking, he's much healthier than I am. I mean, he didn't have an ounce of fat on him. He was exuding good health, and he was already past the years that one even expects a heart recipient to live, let alone thrive and be an athlete. It was one of his questions, was why he was there, and it was the answer to break some of these paradigms, and he got to find out from the other two beings about his hearts and their hearts and how they came together. And such a beautiful man. And on the way out the door, I remember hugging him, and he said, do you want to listen to my heart? And I put my ear on his chest, and it was, a young female heart donor that had gone in there. And he's like this with their family. And it's just such an amazing story. And that's really, really beautiful connection about the soul contracts and how all that works.
Yeah.
Gosh.
They could each talk about that, because Tesla believes it is agreements. Einstein believes that it can be an incongruency, and that's why that those negative core belief systems coming through other particular from the donor can actually affect the recipient negatively. But Tesla very, very briefly argues that, well, if it's negative, it's just a catalyst to transmute something. So they kind of have different views on that.
Right. Oh, I love this conversation. Just becomes more and more rich every time we talk about that. Actually, here's a really great question that's coming up, because I know that we're heading down towards the end of our time together. I want to get to some of these questions. Here's a fascinating question. Kiersey asks, what is causing the deterioration of the brain in diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia? Is there a way to reverse this, and how? What does the A-team have to say about Alzheimer's and dementia?
White matter disease is what Einstein is calling it, which is when the neurons in the brain have become so overstimulated and are overly synapsing in patterns where they're basically, he's doing like this, like when they're trying to synapse, the electromagnetic frequencies run into each other basically and misfire. He's calling it a misfire in the brain. And within that overstimulation is the nucleus is on fire. Like he shows me back to this diagram. This just completely misfires and blows up the nucleus, and then the brain matter basically dies. It's basically burning away the brain matter. It's very hard to reverse it. Human science is not caught up in that technology at all, according to Einstein, and they're nowhere near it. So unfortunately, within the medical system, that we're not advanced enough to help with that. Sound frequencies, according to Tesla, can definitely help with it within brainwave technology and laser technology that's being experimented with right now in the I believe it's the Keshe Foundation.
The Keshe Foundation. We talked about them last time. That was one of the spellings.
Coming up again, Keshe. One day I'll learn how to pronounce it, but within the Keshe Foundation, they are experimenting with plasma technologies and with brainwave technologies involving lasers. And he would like them to combine that with sound frequencies. And when they do, that's going to be an amazing transformation for medical advancement within reversing Alzheimer's disease. But right now, white matter disease is caused by oversynapsing of the brain, which causes misfiring and basically entire neurological fire. That's what he called it, a neurological fire in the nucleus of the cell membranes.
So what's the core reason that this is happening in our society? Is there a reason?
Emoto is saying because humans want to forget. They want
Wow.
to forget pain. They want to forget suffering. Dolores chimes in and says, yes, I've noticed this as well, that in her regression, she is noticing that humans like to, would prefer to just forget about their suffering and to not integrate it, but shove it aside. What I'm noticing is the core belief systems of powerlessness, which is a big one. Restriction-based, any sort of restriction-based core belief systems. I've noticed within Alzheimer patients that they seem to be feeling a lot of negative imprints of futility, where they just kind of look at everything around them and they go, I can't really control that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to forget about it. And their brain follows. It completely goes into the brain matter, and the brain complies, unfortunately.
Is there a sense that we've been increasing this then as we've come into, this time in history, that it's happening more and more? It just, for a lot of us, especially those who are in the healing arts, in the healing profession, trying to help others heal themselves and self-heal, sometimes it's kind of overwhelming to see the increase in some of the bigger, more devastating diseases and conditions in the human body. And we feel a little hopeless about some of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's important to stay out of the powerlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, and try to come together in a unified way to decide how we're going to handle it collectively and individually. There's a lot that's going on in the human conscious collective right now. And if we stand within powerlessness, it just gets worse,
Just going back to what you were saying before, being in the flow, the very first thing that you have to do, even though it seems like you don't, it's not normal the way we've been brought up, is you have to accept where you are. And a lot of people are like, no, I don't want to accept this. Well, that doesn't mean you're choosing it. And it doesn't mean it's your preference. Yeah. It just means you have to accept where you are. If you're on the side of the road somewhere with a broken leg, you are on the side of the road somewhere with a broken leg, and you have to figure out what happens next. And you have to accept your situation to be able to move on.
Yes, allowance and acceptance, absolutely.
Right.
When you formulate an acceptance, that's validation. When you validate what's happening, then what happens is your brain cells light up like a Christmas tree. And synapsing can begin. It's a breath of fresh air to the brain cells, is what Dolores is stating.
And you can actually see that, can't you?
Yeah.
See, that's what makes you and I different, or you differ from most everybody I know, but so cool. And one of the things that Dolores is wanting to do with the expansion of her method is to understand some of this and to validate and to listen with compassionate listening. And allowing the validation to happen, but without going into victimology.
Yes.
Wow, I got a tone in my ear for that one.
You could thank Tesla.
Not sure what's
it's not you personally. I know the furthest thing from a victim.
Oh, well, thank you. I've been told in my own sessions and from Dolores too, I continually manifest things in my body that are painful or I have to deal with to keep me here, to keep me in my body, to keep me grounded. And I'm very annoyed about that at times. And I would like, I would like for it to be easy, but I know that I say, and a lot of practitioners, we say, the idea of fighting whatever you're trying to release isn't the best thing to do. This thing we do as a society, we want to fight cancer, we want to fight diabetes, and we want to fight. And I've started to very gently, with those who aren't directly in this community, but I've started to say, you need to start to understand cancer or understand diabetes or understand, try that instead of the fighting. But there's a blank stare by a lot of people because they think the only way you can possibly survive is if you fight.
What you resist will persist, and fighting is resistance. So this is Einstein doing like this with the wall, and he's beating his head against a metaphorical wall in front of me. He's going like this. And he said, that's going to do nothing but hurt your brain. He's saying in that accent.
Oh, he's funny. I'm so glad Einstein has come into the conversation a little more this time. There's some really great, I don't have the quote right in front of me, but I think it was something like, he said one of the most important questions you could ever ask is the universe a friendly place? Can we ask Einstein, did he really ask that question? And then there's a follow-up where he's, has three possible answers. So the first question is, did he really ask that question?
Yes.
Super. And in his answer, it was, you can believe that it is friendly, you can believe that it's not friendly, or you can be neutral, and each position will afford different outcomes. What does he have to say from his current expression about the universe being friendly or not?
He's bringing me back to this. My terrible drawings. I should channel these before. So
I'm going to get you a little board with a little whiteboard so that you don't have to use the lined paper.
Right. Back to how you use entanglement theory in relation to DNA awakening. So this is you. This is your higher self version, which could be another expression of you somewhere in a different universe or in a different planetary system. These are dimensional frequencies. So this is the middle way. Fourth dimension is the middle way. That is allowance, acceptance, trust, flow. When you're involving the middle way, anything could happen. It is the ultimate trust, right? So when you are stepping through that, that's your expression. So any of these outcomes could happen when you are here, when you strive for the fourth dimension. This is the bridge to everything. You could, within the fourth dimension, you could allow suffering, you could allow love, you could allow anything. He believes that the fourth dimensional existence and expression is the key for third dimensional healing.
Ah, that's beautiful. Beautiful encapsulating of that thought right there. So does anything that you've just talked about there, Maddie Miller, another wonderful colleague, is so excited about this question. She asked it or pressed send 5 times. So I think that means I'm going to have to ask this. And this may be our last question of the day as we're coming down to the end. She asks, how does Einstein feel about the unifying field theory that Nassim Haramein has proposed? Nassim is also an incredible mind and presence and figure in the spirituality and science coming together community. Is Einstein able to view Nassim's premiere movie recently? I didn't even know he had a movie. So what does Einstein have to say about that?
Has not viewed the movie, but he is watching. He is watching, and he says with the unifying field theory that it is an expansion. It's entanglement times 11, he said times 11. So a unifying field theory just expands it and then simplifies it. So expansion and simplification, expansion and simplification is how he does it. And he moves his hands like that while he's talking to me. And he said, I concur. I am in concordance with your unifying field theory.
I wonder if Nassim knows that, or if he visits. Interesting, if he visits or anything. Oh, well, okay. Well, I think we're coming down to the end of our time together today. So, we started the show, the webinar with Nikola Tesla and the flow of I Am. We've talked about that a lot, and a lot of self functions and other things, going down some of those little rabbit holes on the way. Will you make this graphic available near the link, maybe on this YouTube show when you put the replay on, so that we can all see this? And
for those of you who want to see it now, just go to my YouTube channel, look under the processes playlist, and it is called the Flow of the I Am.
So the Flow of the I Am, awakening the inactive DNA. So today's program has focused on that and the cellular structures and water and Emoto and consciousness and a bunch of little sideways forays into other realms of consciousness. But we probably have more to talk about here. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to today, a lot of questions that others have sent in that we may be able to focus on next time. Will the spiritual A team be accepting any new members, or are we going to stay with this core 4?
It's going to be, they are. They don't really want to tell me much more because I'm already a little overstimulated with the work that we're doing now.
Yeah.
It is very ever present in my life and I love it, but it is a little tiring. So we, they don't want to overwhelm me or you or any of us. So we're just taking it a step at a time. And we have so much process work that we're writing and testing and considering. And we have a long ways to go. So let's take it a step at a time. But yes, it will be expanding.
It's so much fun. When I was a little girl, I used to think that Johnny Carson, this is dating me, but Johnny Carson had a talk show on TV. And I used to think that he had the most amazing job in the world, that he could talk to the most amazing people, that nobody could have a better job than Johnny Carson. And you know what? I don't feel like that today because I'm not sure Johnny Carson ever could talk to Einstein or Tesla or Emoto or Dolores Cannon or even you, Pamela. This has been delightful. Thank you so much.
It has. It has. We'll put it on YouTube as soon as we can and come back. We'll probably do it in another week or 2.
You know, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your business manager, Jim, and I want to thank all of the QHHT practitioners who've been so incredibly supportive as this work is just exploding, the interest in.
Thank you for your patience. We've got a lot on our plate, but we're working on it.
Yes, yes. And if you want to find a QHHT practitioner near you, please visit quantumhealingpractitioners.com. And Pamela is at aurareader.com. And
Yeah.
I'm at newearthjourney.com. And we're all on Facebook, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that you guys join us again. Thank you so much, Candace. I'm honored to have you. Thank you for all your work with me. I'm very, very blessed to know you and that you've joined alongside all of us in this journey. And your colleagueship and friendship means the world to me.
Same with me. I love you so much, Pamela. I love you all out there too. We couldn't do this. We wouldn't be doing this without your interest and support, your questions, your enthusiasm, your energy. So thank you all out there and come back next time.
Thank you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.